Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Toohey, and I'm a PhD student from the University of Melbourne. And I'm working on a social science project that's exploring understandings and perspectives on problematic species here in the Otways. It's been really great to see sort of such a diverse range of people here today, because that diversity is really quite central to the topic that I'm going to be talking about. And that's essentially that different groups and different people can look at the same species and the same landscapes and understand and want to respond to it in really different ways. So in a nutshell, this project is exploring the social and cultural side of problematic species management. And as you all know, and as we've heard, managing problematic species is really complicated. But it's not always just because of the species themselves. It's also because people can have really different perspectives on certain species, different perspectives on what makes species problematic, and sort of different perspectives on the ways that we should or should not manage them. So, this results in tensions and conflict that sort of inevitably lead to, destructive processes like polarization and escalation. And it really undermines the efficacy of collaborative and inclusive management approaches. And that phrase, collaborative and inclusive management approaches, might not have filled many of you with much joy or enthusiasm. And it's sort of expected and absolutely fair enough. They do have this real sort of buzzword energy to them. But, we've seen in Australia and in international contexts that the most straightforward species management programs are in sort of uninhabited or low density populated areas or islands where there's not really any need to consider the social and cultural and political constraints. And, some of that, or a lot of that, can be from the challenges that are involved with organizing cross-tenure management, but it can also be from things like real or perceived health risks, or the presence of pets and livestock, or just different perspectives on goals or practices. So I suppose a way to rebrand collaborative and inclusive management is just to say that a large part of managing problematic species is actually managing us and navigating our relationships, whether that's relationships between people or relationships between people and the environment. So within this room, there's already really diverse perspectives on this topic, and you might be really surprised to the extent that that's true within a group that you would pretty safely assume share quite similar goals. So to give you some examples of the diversity that I'm speaking about, I've chucked up some screenshots of Australian news articles. These may not all be relevant to you or to the Otways, and that's quite intentional because this research is ongoing, and I'm sort of hoping to talk to a few more of you in this room. I don't want to pull examples from the research that might inadvertently lead future conversations. So that being said, these news articles do a pretty good job of illustrating what I'm talking about anyway. So we've got introduced trout. That second one there is Phalaris. Both of those can be seen as a pest or a resource, depending on who you are. Dingoes and wild dogs. So, that's the iconic Australian example of this. And sulphur-crested cockatoos in WA, which, there's a little bit of a conversation about native species. Yep, and just a few more. These slides actually illustrate diverse perspectives on control, use, and management. So we've got chemical treatment for fire ants up in Queensland, which is a pretty big conversation at the moment. The feeding of stray and feral cats. Gene editing for invasion control, which can be pretty divisive. Some quite sensationalist language there in that article. And illegal hunting practices. That's an example up in Bribie Island. So, these different perspectives, they inevitably lead to tensions and conflict in management. And these tensions are not inconsequential. they're really deeply tied to how people relate to different species and to how or to what people see as a healthy and natural environment. And to give some really quick examples of that, people can have quite different ideas of what ideal nature looks like. For some people, that might be wilderness, sort of quite absent of human intervention, like national parks. For other people, it's more inclusive, like biocultural landscapes, managed by traditional owners for ongoing cultural practices, or multi-use bushland like state forests, or sometimes functional as a sustainably managed resource like agricultural land. Some people can have different perspectives on whether nature is balanced and stable, or whether it's dynamic and changing, or whether it's fragile or resilient, and in what context. And these different ideas, they represent quite different understandings and relationships between people and the environment. And that's pretty much the core of our research. So we're exploring perspectives on problematic species within the context of the Otways, broader views and understandings, or how that first point ties in to broader views and understanding of the natural environment, and how it ties in again to different perspectives on control, use, and management. And to briefly get a little bit philosophical, this way of looking at things, it kind of shifts the research questions that we ask. And instead of looking at conflict and asking questions like, why do or don't people support conservation projects? We're asking questions more like, how do people decide what should be considered nature to be protected? Or how do people decide what a healthy environment looks like in practice? Or, what species are valuable and what species are problematic? And it might sound a little bit more, as I said, a little bit more philosophical, but, asking these questions has a real consequence on the ground for how these conflicts emerge, and then for whether and how people can work together. And it also means seeing conflict not just as something to be solved or avoided, but more as something that we have to understand and navigate. And sometimes conflict can be from an information deficit or from a misunderstanding. And in an ideal world, we would be able to solve it, but it's just often not the case. The world, we inhabit the biophysical world, but we also very much inhabit the social world, and people have different ways of understanding and seeing the world. And our views are shaped by the social and cultural background that we come from. So all of that to say, what are we actually doing? Nothing revolutionary. We're currently conducting 30 to 45-minute interviews, semi-structured interviews, with as broad a range of people as possible. So, environmental managers and authorities, traditional owners, conservation groups, local land care, community members, people in the ag and forest industries, recreational users of the Otways, recreational hunters, game harvesters, etc. And those interviews are structured around the topics that I previously mentioned. So that, understandings of problematic species in the Otways, how this ties into the broader understandings of the natural environment, and the ways in which perspectives on the ways in which problematic species are controlled and used and managed. And that's sort of the broader topic. And then alongside that, running concurrently, we have our species case study, which is on feral pigs. So we are talking with people who hunt pigs in the Otway Range region to better understand how people who engage with pigs, particularly as a resource, see their role, and how they think about feral pigs and their control, use, and management in the Otways. So to wrap up, there's a few key outcomes of this research. First, we want to sort of build that in-depth and quite nuanced understanding of the different perspectives in the Otways to help better map out points of tension and conflict. Second, we hope to support more constructive conversations that, to make it easier for people to engage productively rather than sort of go through, again, those destructive processes like polarization and escalation, which, just don't get anywhere. So, and this kind of leads into the third outcome, that the research can inform conflict management or collaborative and inclusive management by helping us to navigate these relationships, both between people and the environment. And finally, the findings are going to be sort of quite widely accessible and useful to support lots of different people who connect to these discussions in different ways. An example of this is our feral pig case study, which sort of quite importantly sits alongside the very important ecological project that CEC has ongoing. So again, if you're interested in having a chat, if you've got perspectives that you want to share, please let me know. I should say that one of the challenges of this research is that I'm often looking to, because we want that really wide range of perspectives, I'm often looking to talk to people who aren't the first people to want to put their hands up for this kind of research. So if you have something you'd like to say, but you sort of having second thoughts about it, I really encourage you just to reach out and have a chat. If you're tech savvy, I've got my QR code up there, but I've also popped a few of those flyers out in the other room. So feel free to shoot me an email, text or call, or if you're really old-fashioned, you can just come and say hello. And that's it. Thank you.
Libby has almost caught us. Oh, Rebecca's almost caught us up. So you can have a question. There is one. Forever hold your peace. Thank you very much.